Hello! So, I don't know, the last video I posted was a book review, and I don't want to be in my book talk, booktube era or anything, but I've got another book review for you. It's another one of Julia Quinn's books. I said I was probably going to read the Bridgerton books, and yeah, I've read 3 of them now. I managed to buy them at car boot sale for about 20p each because I am not paying full price of £8.99 for these books, and therefore I cannot tell you if I will be reviewing the rest of the series or not, because it's a matter of finding them for less than £8.99. And I mean, I could probably get them online, but you know, I do have book number 7 that I also found at a car boot sale, but that's not much use because I can't read. I need to read the ones before. I'm pretty sure all of them kind of work as standalone. In comparison to like the Netflix series, the books themselves, they are very just centered around that couple with like maybe a little bit of background information, but the Netflix series really has expanded on what is actually in the books. For the first season of Bridgerton, you have Benedict's sort of art is mentioned, and you also have like Anthony's like fling with the opera singer is also mentioned, all in the first season, whereas they're only vaguely, briefly sort of brought up in the books that they're actually centered on them. General overview is, so some of the changes of the Netflix series I actually like. I think it's safe to say they're probably better. The series is better on Netflix than they are in the books. But some of the changes also I think made it worse as well, which is interesting. Benedict's story is the next to be adapted by Netflix, and I'm both looking forward to how they will adapt that and change it and hopefully make it better, because this book was an experience. But anyway, I'm going to start in chronological order. So that's for this one. Obviously I've got the Netflix cover because it's probably impossible to find the non-Netflix cover at this point. Now, what first struck me was that Daphne's description is like completely different to how she actually looks in the Netflix series. And it kind of confuses me a bit, because apparently, despite being a Bridgerton, presumably with a massive diary, apparently she's on like her 2nd year or something. What does it say? She's practically on the shelf, apparently. She's a Bridgerton. Presumably she's pretty attractive, and she's got a massive doubt. What do you mean she's struggling to find suit? I don't really. So I kind of like the change in the Netflix version where she is like that season's incomparable. She's the diamond. Everyone wants her, because who wouldn't? I don't understand why she's struggling to find anyone. But honestly, I was off to quite a good start with this. I'm probably gone. Like, it opens up with the Duke Simon, his backstory, which allows you to have a bit more insight into why this guy acts like the way he does. And actually it made me sort of like him a bit more as a character. I'm trying to remember how it goes in the Netflix one. I haven't watched it in a couple of years. I know it was adapted, but definitely. But it was just kind of nice to get more inside his head, because of course you're seeing it from his perspective a bit more, which makes him a bit more understandable. Because yeah, either way he's still a bit of a twat, but here we are. I actually really enjoyed some of this book, especially like the banter between like the siblings, mainly like the 4 eldest, because they're the only ones that are mentioned apart from Hyacinth. Like Eloise, she's not been in these 3 books. She's probably maybe got like 1 line. Like, she is completely irrelevant. Completely. Hyacinth has more plot relevancy than Eloise. Yeah, I really liked some of the basically the character interactions were really good, really enjoyable. I like that kind of thing in books. I really enjoy character interactions and good conversations, people delving into what they think about things, how they feel. I really enjoy that. And they had some really good chemistry. Simon and Daphne have really good chemistry in the book. However, every so often, I don't know if I can find the page or not, Oh, it might take me a little while. 2 seconds. Like, they go from having like a really good like chemistry and joking and just having a really nice sort of, you know, think, oh, this is a good start to a romance. And then like all of a sudden you get jump scared by him just having like a completely unhinged thought. Like this whole page here is like just conversation between like Simon, Anthony, Benedict, Colin, you know, having a nice bit of banter, and then it just suddenly ends with him being like, Simon decided this wasn't the time to mention that he'd been 1 inch away from easing her up against the wall, pressing his hips against her and kissing her senseless. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, it was going so well and you just had to ruin it with a, oh, just, it was going well. And that kind of writing of where it's going like, it's a lovely romance where you're kind of rooting for the characters, and then all of a sudden Julia Quinn comes in with poof, random bit of sex, and it's just how she writes. I know at this point it's just how she writes, and I think the readers in general like that, but it just kind of give you whiplash, especially if like you're not actually into that, and I'm generally not that into it because they're weird. It's just all kind of uncomfortable, if you know what I mean. Like all the men are very sexual, they're players, they're rakes, and all the women are virgins, and it just gives you that sort of, you know, when you read it. To me, I'm sure some people find that more of a, but I find it more of a, you know, it's not my cup of tea, is what I'm saying. But yeah, they changed. Nigel is actually just a normal guy. He's just a bit pathetic in this book. He marries one of the Featheringtons sisters, the cool one. He's like cooler. But yeah, generally I really liked like the dynamics in this book. Simon does, however, get on my nerves a bit. I mean, you understand him better in this book than you do in the Netflix series. He's actually less of a creep, despite what I mentioned about you get whiplash from the occasional comments. In the Netflix series, he's a lot more sexual, I think. He's sort of like go home and touch yourself and things like that, and it's a bit more weird. And my sort of issue with Simon character is that, what is he, like 28 or something? Presumably. He's like reaching 30 and he hasn't figured anything out yet. I'm not saying you need to have everything figured out by 30, but I'd expect a bit more maturity. He kind of like you know, the saying like you've made your bed, so sleep in it, or you reap what you sow. He kind of just like doesn't seem to get that. Like, if you don't want kids, keep it in your pants. This is the early 1800s. There are no condoms. There's no birth control. There's nothing to prevent it, or there's no abortion. There's nothing. Just so if you really don't want kids, maybe don't act like you do in this book, where you are shagging everything that moves, can't keep your hands off someone, and then if you fall in love with a woman, maybe think about her feelings in the situation. Don't lie to her. Be straight up honest about it. And this always comes out better in my head when I'm just thinking myself, and then as soon as I turn the camera on, I just go, and nothing comes out. But like, I just think you've got to think like your love for your wife or whatever should probably outweigh your hatred for your father. Also, he's dead. How are you going to piss him off any more than you already have? Because he's dead. He's not going to know what you're doing right now. And I don't know if there's any sort of, I don't think they mention any sort of like belief in heaven or anything, like, oh, he's looking down, he's turning in his grave. I don't know if they even say anything like that. It's a bit pathetic to me. Like, you should probably, if you just communicated, like, he very quickly changes his mind, so I don't know why, like, just by talking by someone and realising that he actually loves Daphne, he quickly changes his mind on being a twat about it. And, you know, they live happily ever after, but, like, why didn't you just talk about this to begin with? Why weren't you clear about this to begin with? And also, if you didn't want to marry her because you didn't want to have kids, why did you compromise her? Why did you put her in that situation where she was forced to marry you? Like, you should have, you reap what you sow, like I said, you've made your bed, lie in it. Like, think about your actions, don't just be controlled by your boner all the time. Like, that, you know, maybe he should just, like, engaged the brain rather than the penis. I'm just, think about what he's doing for once. Actually, they made a bad / good change. I don't really, depends what you think. The infamous sort of Daphne on top scene where it gets a bit rapey and everyone hates Daphne now. In the book, it's not nearly as bad. Like, he goes from giving, like, really quite enthusiastic consent. I'm not going to be able to find the page. I should have bookmarked this. It's not great. Here we are. Like, he goes from saying things like, where did you learn that? I want you more. To suddenly realising sort of what's happening and being like, oh Christ, I'm going to. I can. And then that's kind of the only sort of chance. Like, the consent is a little bit more ambiguous in the book than it is in the Netflix. But yeah, it's a little bit, like, it's less rapey in the book, which actually surprised me. I was expecting so much worse. So that really did shock me, and I thought, wow, it's a little bit better. Because, you know, Daphne's not quite as rapey in that book, because at least he gives her quite enthusiastic consent of, where did you learn that? More. I want you. I want to watch you. She then sort of, in this span of probably about 10 seconds, being like, I can't. And then the post-nut clarity hits, and then he starts shouting. Oh, there's one thing about these books is that every single book, they always have like a shouting scene. They always have to have some horrible argument where it's like, I would be terrified. How are they not terrified? How is this romantic or sexy or whatever? It's a bit scary. That brings me to the line of, okay, legally, I own you, and I can make you want me. I could force you to let me stay. Like, just vague sort of rape threats, and it's a bit, I'm sorry, saying that you own someone might be sexy in like a sexual situation. This is not like a sexual situation, this is an argument, and like, she's kicking him out because they've, yeah. And he's saying, oh, I could force you if I wanted to. That's not sex. That is pretty gross. If, like, your partner said that to you, it's not it. It's not it. That's just... They both kind of suck. They still suck. Except you do feel more like Simon sucks in this book. Rather than maybe... No, they both suck. If Daphne just didn't have, like, the rapey scene, she'd be fine. Like, it's not her fault that she was lied to, but like, just that scene, like, it's so unnecessary. I guess it was the culmination of where this plot was gonna go, is that something like that had to happen, but it's still just not very nice. But yeah, they do eventually, like I said, he quickly changes his mind just by talking to like his friends, realising he loves Daphne, and then bam, they live happily ever after. So generally I had quite a positive impression of this book, because it was better than I expected. I had low expectations following reading Splendid, and then this came out and I was like pleasantly surprised. So that's my thing, is this book was a pleasant surprise compared to the Netflix series. I expected a lot worse. They have good chemistry, they have, you know, the smuts meh in all of these, not gonna lie. It's just, she has a really weird obsession with like virginity, and like it always hurts, it's always like bloody, and then it's just weird. There's always like a weird focus on like hymens, and that's just kind of to me. I'm sure some people find it, I find it you know, I just don't, I'm not into that. It's just kind of uncomfortable and weird. Also, like, losing your virginity isn't always like that. Sorry, it isn't. The men in these books just suck. So I guess that brings me on to the second book, which was Anthony's story. And this is obviously quite famously changed from like the Netflix series, made more of a love triangle, and they even get Edwina and Anthony to the altar. In this doesn't even happen. Anthony's trying to force himself to like Edwina because she's sort of malleable. She's basically, she's young, she's malleable, she's the ideal wife because she'll just, there's no fight in her necessarily. And he's just trying to stop him because she loves her sister, and he is a confirmed rake. And he does nothing to really stop being a rake, because he even kisses Kate in pure old good Julia Quinn fashion on like like a quarter of the way through the book and then acts like what was he thinking? It's just like, I need these characters to like kiss or smooch because I'm like a quarter through the book and they haven't done it yet. Yeah, we'll just have like some random moment. Why? You didn't need to do it. It just comes up. It's a bit predatory and I don't like it. He's just kind of angry and arguing all the time. I'm not into that kind of flirting where they just argue all the time. Because it's not really, they just kind of hate each other for the majority of the book, but it turns out they love each other, and it's kind of weird. I do kind of like the sort of enemies to lovers thing, but I feel like it's difficult to do right, and I don't know whether they did it correctly or not. I don't know, if you were being called a rake and you wanted to prove you were good at, maybe you wouldn't then make advances on the person that you're trying to prove to that you're not a rake, because that just makes you a rake. But yeah, generally it was okay. Kate gets like involved in a carriage crash or whatever, rather than falling off a horse or whatever. We actually get Kate's backstory, which was really good. I don't believe that was in the Netflix version, but actually that was really good, and they could sort of bond over that, and I liked that. But I don't know, it's kind of weird. Also, one thing I've noticed in like every one of these books is the female lead always looks the same. She's always got like brown hair or like grey brown eyes. Like, be a bit more creative, honestly. Like, Kate has like light brown hair and like grey eyes. Daphne has like dark brown hair and brown eyes with a bit of green. And I can't even remember what Sophie looks like. I think she's got like brown hair and probably like grey eyes. Shocking, isn't it? Then they sort of go into a bit more of Anthony's backstory as well, and actually I prefer the Netflix backstory of him actually like seeing his, they made his backstory a hell of a lot more traumatic, and that actually explains so much more of his actions, whereas in this it's just like his dad died and he stared at his body, and that was, I mean, understandably that it would be traumatizing, but the amount that it affects him, you'd expect something a little bit more. It just kind of comes across as a bit, just talk to someone. Don't these men talk to anyone? They just sort of sit there and take their problems out on their wives rather than like ever having a discussion about it. And it's just kind of like, please just talk to someone about your irrational fear of death. No, but yeah, I think the Netflix version of making him witness his father's death and then having all this responsibility forced on him, and because the bee thing doesn't, because the bee scene happens in this book where, and they sort of, it looks like they're kissing or fondling each other or whatever, and they get caught, so they have to get married, the usual. But Anthony's freak out at the bee makes so much more sense in the Netflix version where he witnessed it happen, whereas in the book he kind of just knows of the bee secondhand. And I think the reaction, the fear makes a hell of a lot more sense when something that he witnessed firsthand and is just like brought back into that moment of freaking out and watching his dad die. But instead because he didn't see his dad, like he just came back and his dad was dead. And they are basically arguing for the sake of just dragging on the plot. Like, just communicate, just talk. It's really frustrating when none of them just communicate and talk. Like, you both have very similar traumatic childhoods to do with like a parent's death. Just talk it out and explain your fears. Like, da-da, or, you know, talk to your brothers about it. Like, just do something, please. Unfortunately, there is one scene in this book that really quite made me uncomfortable. I'm not sure if you've watched my last review of the Splendid trilogy, you'll know about like the ending of Minx, where there's basically just like a marital rape scene. It kind of had echoes of this. This whole book had echoes of Minx, to be honest, of, oh, confirmed bachelor meets a girl that pisses him off so much he wants to basically like Kate is scared of the marital night, and honestly, considering these books, I would not considering the men in these books, I too would be scared of a wedding night with them. They do not respect consent. So I'm just gonna try and find the scene. I'm not really sure what she's afraid of, but at the same time, like, she's allowed to be afraid. She's allowed to, you know, have time and feel safe. She needs to feel safe. She needs to feel relaxed. Like, she shouldn't be forced into this kind of thing. Husband should be patient with, you know, like, there's no rush, you know? And, I don't know, they just immediately start arguing before this. And she's like, oh yeah, and she's like, did your mother not tell you? And she's like, oh, she explained everything. And he's like, then what the hell is your problem? No, she's allowed to be scared. Just be patient. You need to make her feel safe. And you're not making her feel safe if you start swearing at her. Do you fear me? Do I repulse you? I don't know, it's just kind of, she's like, I can't, and he's sort of like, I can't wait a week. I cannot do it. Do it. Do you love her? Wait. If she's not ready, she's not ready. Like, it's just, and then of course his only answer was a low growl of need. I hate growls, they're gross. Just, cringe. I don't, like, it's not quite marital rape or anything, but there's just that sort of like, where like the man needs sex, but the woman doesn't actually want it. And, I hate the idea that men need sex. It's just horrible, because it's just rapey, okay? Just like, I don't know, it was just like the dubious consent of like, Anthony is like too impatient to like respect that she's not ready, and that's just not great. That kind of ruined like how it was going, because they start arguing because she doesn't want to have sex, and it's just like, oh my god, was that really necessary? Was that really necessary? Was not necessary to have that kind of rapey scene in there. It was a disappointment, not gonna lie, actually. Just Anthony was just worse in like every way. Kate was like better in every way, and Anthony was like worse in every way, and he just does my head in. Communicate, people, respect consent, be patient, be kind. Anyway, this story, I had no idea what this was going into it, because they haven't made it, because they did Penelope's stories after. They did Penelope's story or Benedict's story or whatever better before this one, which made sense, because that really ends, the second book ends on like, well, who's Whistledown, and then they just completely go around it in this book. Now this book, Enough from a Gentleman, starts really well and it ends really well. The middle, however, is just awful. I don't like it. You have the whole sort of sad backstory of Sophie being a bastard, yada 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 yada, and you have the Cinderella story of her going to the ball. She meets Benedict, they dance, but of course they smooch and everything as well. Well, no, they don't have sex. They just kiss, and it's just like, oh my god, okay, bit much. You've known her for like 10 minutes and you like want to marry her already, but you know, I guess that's the Cinderella story, so we'll forgive it. Then the middle of, she gets sort of kicked out of like where she's living as the Cinderella, being abused and such, and she has to go just work as a lady's maid, etc. And she's working for this family that's not very nice. I mean, the son's not very nice, and he and his friends try to like assault her at a party that Benedict is also there. So Benedict finds her, doesn't recognise her obviously because it was a masquerade, she had a ball, finds her with the masquerade, saves her, and then takes her back to his cottage. And like the whole sort of plot is just like, how can we keep these two characters in close proximity for like as long as possible? And it felt a bit fanficky, if you know what I mean. It's like, oh no, there's only one bed. Oh no, of course he gets ill, and then of course, oh, he's like, oh, can I repay you? Oh, you must come back with me to London and work for my mother. Oh, and then it's a little bit, it's just a bit weird. Like I don't think anyone's actually, like, servants have not been mentioned in like any of the other books particularly, I don't think. And then in this one, suddenly they're like best buddies with one of the servants, because of course she becomes their servant for a bit. It's just weird to me, like she's so special. Like, since when did they care that much about their servants? I do, however, really like the sort of Whistledown bits of like the maid drama going on of them trying to get people to Sophie's stepfamily trying to get a maid to replace Sophie now that she's gone, and it just not ever working out because they had Sophie doing so much work that no other maid can stick it because it was abuse. Yeah, I had really high hopes for Benedict because they swapped him and Colin's like personalities in the Netflix version, and then he just thoroughly disappointed me by being like the same as the rest, like the other men in the series, just creepy. But of course they all get away with it because they're so hot and attractive, and it just kind of... I mentioned in my previous review that Julia Quinn writes her love interest in the same way that like Georgette Heyer writes her villains, in that all the Bridgerton bachelors, men or whatever, they all have their mistresses, whereas in a Georgette Heyer book, if you had a mistress, that usually meant you were a piece of shit. And Benedict has the grace and elegance to ask this maid, Sophie, to be his mistress, and then is sort of like confused at why she's insulted by that. Most women would be insulted by that. Basically asking them to like sacrifice their reputation and all that. No. I mean, if you read Jane Eyre or whatever, like, do I do plot spoilers for Jane Eyre? Do I need to do plot spoilers? No, you know, Mr. Rochester asks Jane to be his mistress because he's already married to the crazy woman in his loft. And she's so insulted by that, and it's so against her morals that she leaves. And because she's a good Christian woman, I guess the majority of, you know, the people in the Regency would have been good Christian that wouldn't have been against being, you know, it's kind of an insult to be asked that, and it's a bit sleazy of Benedict to ask for. And of course, like the sex scene in this book, at this point, he doesn't know that she's like the woman from the masquerade. He still thinks she's just a maid called Sophie. And yeah, he's just completely fine with sleeping with her. Like I said, Julia Quinn has this like weird obsession with like sex scenes involving virgins and losing their virginity and hymens and blood and pain, and it's just, it's grim. It just is. It's uncomfortable. I just feel bad for Sophie because this guy's just a bit of an arsehole. Like, you should treat her with a bit more respect if he... I don't know, it's just weird. It's, like I said, it's just fanficky Wattpad kind of plot going on. However, I really liked the ending because everyone gets their just like desserts. Her stepfamily gets their just desserts. It's quite dramatic. It reminded me a bit more of like a Georgette Heyer book, in where the plot is like really calm and then it gets to the end and it's like, and someone gets stabbed. You know what I mean? So like Sophie ends up in jail, they have to bail her out of jail, yada yada. In one of the Georgette Heyer books, I think it's called Devil's Cub, they do a very similar thing with the plot where influential person basically just gaslights everyone into saying this is what happened, this is... And it's such a just a historical novel thing you can do because there's no cameras. Everyone will believe you if you've got enough money. All you have to do is just like have enough influence. You can just get out of it, and I do enjoy that. Okay, it's quite amusing. So they basically just say, Sophie's not a bastard, she's your cousin, and they're like, yes, she's our cousin, yes. Problem solved. Also the stepdaughters, was it Posey? I can't remember, but she's cool. She's cool, and she lives with the Bridgertons or something now. I wonder if she'll ever come up again. Probably not. But yeah, this book was like I said, the beginning is strong and the end is strong in sort of like how it's all handled, but the middle is just like, keep these two characters in close proximity. Also, I want you to take a guess at what you think Benedict's reaction was to finding out that Sophie was the woman from the masquerade. Do you think A, he was so happy he kissed her face off, or B, shouting match? It was B. Of course it was B. Shouting match. He doesn't... I don't know. If you found out that the woman that you loved was also the woman that you loved and have been dreaming about for ages, would you not be happy? But no, he just gets angry. Like, why do you think she didn't tell you when you, like... when you saw that she was a maid? Like, why... Turn his brain on. Like, why would you... Clearly didn't tell you who she clearly hid her identity in the beginning for a reason, and she's clearly hiding her identity now for a reason, because she's a bastard, she's a servant, she's all these things. Like, what? How do you not understand that? Why do you get angry at her? Like, what would you have done if she told you this straight away? Like, oh, long time no see, and you'd be like, you're a maid. You'd be like, yeah, and you'd be like, weird, bye. Something like, was he really just gonna, like, I don't know. But what I really did like about this is also Violet is just awesome. Like, this whole book, she's just great. Like I said, she swoops in at the end and it's like, she's your cousin, right? Gaslights society into believing everything's fine with Sophie, and she's also like really nice to Sophie, gives her money and all this stuff. And she also tells Benedict, like, it's okay if you marry, like, someone, like, you know, lower down in the ranks. Like, I don't really care. I love you. You're my son. Like, she's just a great parent, great mum, you know. Yeah, this book had some, like, strong bits. I say beginning and end. Anything that involves Violet is great. Benedict just completely... I went in with high expectations for Benedict and I was thoroughly disappointed, and I don't know how they're going to fix this in the adaptation for Netflix, because that plot just sucks of them just basically, how do we keep characters in close proximity forever? It's just a bit and he's a sleaze in this one. They all suck. At this point I'm not really sure which one of these three men is actually the most decent. It's probably Anthony, but no, they all suck. I can't. It's like choosing between, like, I don't know, 3 different piles of shit. They're all shit. I don't know. Anyway, I'll probably still... Either way, these books are, like, so easy to read. You can read them in a day. You might take a lot of psychic damage, but they'll probably be fairly enjoyable, but also, like, might be enjoyable in that they're so bad they're good way. What I do like is the sort of, like, bits at the end. They always have that, you know, like, you know, 19 years later, but it's not 19 years later, it's they've all got kids, happily ever after, and sort of I love the little whistle down bits. That is probably, like, the best, what makes this so enjoyable. But, like, the actual, like, romances can be a bit, they are better, I will say. They are better than the Splendid trilogy by far, which is saying something about how bad those ones were when these are better. But so I'm sort of pleasantly surprised, because I was expecting worse, but I'm still not like, oh, that was fantastic, or oh, finally a healthy relationship. It's just, I don't know. See, I've never really argued with my partner, so like, the closest thing to, like, I can't really relate to them arguing over these things all the time and, like, being, like, shouting matches every 2 seconds. Like, the closest thing to an argument I've had with my boyfriend is, like, I couldn't decide where to eat, and I started sort of having an autism, and he sort of got frustrated, and we just went out of town just to force me to do something. And as soon as we parked up, he was like, sorry about my language. And, like, he just basically immediately apologised once everything had calmed down. And, like, I appreciate that. But, like, I didn't shout. He didn't really shout. He just, he was just getting annoyed and might have sworn, like, a little bit. But, like, we've never really, like, I wouldn't call that an argument, because it was just him getting annoyed. That was it. I just don't really get, like, the shouting matches in these books and how that's supposed to be romantic, or all these relationships. I feel like they're kind of just built around, like, desire and sex, and it's just not particularly healthy in my opinion to do that. Thank you for watching my review. Hopefully I will get this edited. Hopefully I haven't run out of storage while I was filming this. Should I read the next ones? I will probably make another video. There's another book I want to do a rant on, but I don't know if I'll get around to it. I don't want to like become a booktuber. I kind of just post whatever the hell I post, but it's just, it is what it is. Slay, queens. See you next time. Sorry about the state of my plushies. My boyfriend like murdered them, and I've tried to put them back, but I might have to just take them all off and start again. They've just but anyway, bye bye.